So, this reflection is on the importance of keeping families together. On the one hand, this is a kind of obvious truth, and a lot of people from the conservative right to even lefty progressives would agree on this particular topic. It's ideally, I think, the case where a child is raised, and this is really what it has to do with children. It's ideal for a child to be raised with both mother and father, or I guess in our modern age, father and father, or mother and mother, as long as there's a yin and a yang, an interplay, where I think the beauty of marriage, however you want to define it, is that individuals have to subsume their egos for something greater. And this is very critical for the rearing of children. Now, I think the prevalence of divorce and families falling apart in the West, especially in the U.S., which is what I'm most familiar with, is a function of how we revel in the ego. Everyone thinks they're the most important person in the world, and that their views are right and everyone else is wrong. When it comes to child rearing, this is especially important when a lot of marriages fall apart because parents don't agree with each other's child rearing philosophy, and neither will give in. But again, the yin and the yang. If it's gonna work, people have to subsume that ego. And again, this idea of subsuming the ego is something that is very obvious to me from my recent meditation experience. And I'm sure some people are tired of me harping on this, but it's so important, I think. I'll say it again. I think everyone should take this course. www.dhamma.org, DHAMMA. It points to a fundamental truth in all of us. But anyway, in relation to kind of Buddhist concepts applicable to, and I don't even like to use the description Buddhist. I mean, these were things that the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, discovered, and religion afterwards, typically of all religions, got kind of corrupted, and people started bowing to statues and chanting and things like that. But really, the Buddha just discovered a technique for human beings to get in touch with their truth, and he wanted to share this technique with as many people as possible. And thanks to a handful of people across 2,500 years, this technique was preserved in its relative purity. And luckily we have access to it. And thanks to Essa and Goenka, I think, I can't be grateful enough for how these ideas are now, especially with technology, because really his teachings, the Buddhist teachings through Goenka are coming through video and audio. It's possible to disseminate these ideas throughout the globe, and hopefully this will happen, because, not to sound like a crazy cultish type person, these ideas really, I think, could change the world. Anyway, back to family integrity. This concept in Buddhism of a sankhara, it's often translated mental conception or formation. It's one of the 5 skandhas, or 5 heaps that perpetuate this illusion of ego and identity. But I've taught Buddhism for a while before actually taking this course, as I mentioned in a previous post, or maybe I didn't mention that. But one of the things that was very clear to me is that theory is useless, maybe even detrimental without practice. That in the Noble Eightfold Path, there are 3 categories: ethics, morality, which is kind of the basic starting point. But then there's also meditation, or mental discipline, and finally wisdom. And when I taught Buddhism, I, not surprisingly maybe as a philosopher, always put wisdom first, saying Buddhism is the most philosophical religion because it starts with seeing things, understanding things the right way. But what I didn't realize until taking this course is that understanding means nothing. Maybe not nothing, but really, in comparison to the truth, the Dhamma, it means nothing without experience, without that mental discipline through meditation. Anyway, so back to sankharas. Sankharas are the what's the best way to put it? The habit patterns of our mind that are deeply rooted in us. Really, I think for the West, maybe it's most easily approachable, this idea of a sankhara, through psychoanalysis. I think even though Freud is often kind of, I don't know, his reputation isn't what it used to be. I think his brilliance and his influence is a function of recognizing, and again, it's so obvious today for a lot of people that people don't give Freud enough credit, how important early childhood experiences are in forming a person's character, and shaping their or determining their trajectory for the rest of their lives. And it's related to a lot of things. Maybe Freud put too much emphasis on sexuality, but that's a part of it, right? But the point is that childhood is critical, and that goes back to parenting and keeping families together. And when children grow up in dysfunctional families, in families where either the mother or the father or both are messed up in some way, devastating consequences. I mean, look what happened in Newtown with Sandy Hook. Tears. I don't know. I don't want to feel or sound like self-indulgent, but thinking of those poor kids slaughtered like that, it just kills me inside. And that's a function ultimately of parenting, and people know this. And some people are messed up in some way from the beginning, but parenting will mess up children almost invariably. It takes a unique child to be able to survive or thrive bad parenting. Well, anyway, I got lost in thought about those kids. But, I think the worst case scenario for a child is when he or she does not have a good, for lack of a better word, a good mother. Not to dismiss the importance of fathers. Obviously, I think there's this almost cliche stereotype of fathers, especially after a divorce, who don't care about their kids, who won't pay child support, who just care about running around and having fun. And I'm sure there are a lot of fathers like that, right? But in my experience, and I guess a lot of this is personal, the vast majority of fathers care deeply about their children. But we live in a society, and really we've always lived in, maybe not always, there might be some cultures that are slightly different, but most cultures, because it's true, place much more importance on the role of the mother than the father. So the mother typically has the child's custody, and so, I understand that, again, this goes back to the importance of parenting generally, but especially mothers. I understand why fathers sometimes are dismissed, their role is dismissed. But, especially in like Western culture in the U.S., I think women, often have, I don't know how to say this without sounding almost sexist, but almost too much power, because on top of this magical ability to produce life out of their own body, it's a really a wonderful thing that have always, throughout history, lent itself to this reverence for women. On top of that, now we have this kind of sexual, erotic power that women have, and also newfound economic power. The economic power is a double-edged sword. I think in the past, without any economic power, women were oppressed, no doubt, much more than they are today. But with this sexual power added on top, if you watch television for any amount of time, you see how much how women are just flaunting their sexuality, right? Not that sexuality is a bad thing, right? Far from it. But the way it's used to just draw people in, well, all of that power together, I think, sometimes gives women in our society, and in the case of divorce, a sense that they're completely in control of the situation, and a man becomes powerless. And this is why, or a big reason why you have men who end up just so frustrated, they end up killing themselves, or worse. I don't know. I mean, that's pretty bad, but yeah, it is worse. Killing other people, their exes, or even their children, in the most tragic of cases. That frustration, I think, is a function of this kind of ego gone wild in some women, at least, after divorce. Anyway, as I was saying, still, despite all these potential pitfalls, I think it is true that women are more important to raising children. I do agree, in fact, that they should be granted primary custody in the vast majority of cases for that reason. The cases of the most messed up development in children, in my experience, in my knowledge, not personal experience, luckily, well, maybe a little bit, but those cases are, by and large, a function of a bad mom. When you have a mom who is really messed up, then you end up with a kid who is really messed up. The Lanza type, I don't even like speaking his name, but the types of people, like the guy in Finland, are also Breivik. What was his name, right? I think especially about that there was this Korean guy or Korean American guy who killed several people in Virginia Tech. I mean, it was very well known in the Korean American community that he essentially didn't have a mom, or had a mom who didn't care. A child without a mother's love is just lost, and that's the worst thing, right? And so it's, obviously the father's role, although in my opinion not as crucial in a child's development as the mother's, is also quite important. You end up with a bad dad. I mean, especially an abusive father, physically, maybe even worse, sexually, right? Those kids end up messed up. They're deeply, deeply impacted. And so the sankharas in these kids are so deep, right? There's so much pain that it's so hard for them to get rid of. And even good kids who try their best to overcome this, because of the strength of these early childhood impressions, right? These sankharas are so entrenched in them that they often lead to these horribly painful results that spreads like a virus. And so again, it's so important to keep families together. When men mess up and in a marriage and end up, and a lot of men do this, end up say having an affair or worse in relation to that, getting someone else pregnant, they often have to try to convince themselves that, well, because they know deep down inside they messed up and they've sacrificed this family. But the woman they end up doing this for, there's this cliche of the old economically successful dude who ditches his family for a trophy wife. I mean, it's a cliche because it's all too common. Guys will do this and then justify it saying, oh, this is true love, or because they have to convince themselves that what they're doing makes sense, because deep down inside they know that they've deeply impacted their family, right? And when women, I mean, again, because of the importance of women, the centrality of women, because they're bearing life out of their own bodies, I can see why women often decide not to, and especially nowadays when women are more educated and more sensitive to a lot of these things, decide not to get married because, a lot of men suck, and if they're not worth it, or they don't think they're worthy of raising a child, right? Some opt to do it on their own, which, I understand, but is tricky because of the yin-yang thing, right? The ego balance thing. I admire women who end up not having children at all, despite their huge desire for that. I guess back in the day, convents were a good refuge for women like this because, hey, what better husband could you have than Christ? But then, you don't have that child to raise. But anyway, so back to linking this to sankharas. When women mess up, right? Well, it's one thing for men to mess up, but when women mess up, it's almost worse because of their centrality in raising the children. And if they bear a child by another man, I mean, whoa, people will freak out, right? And both, it doesn't matter. It's not a contest. Both are really bad. Because what you end up doing is asserting your ego and saying, oh, my desires are more important than that of the family. You end up hurting the children. That's what matters. The sankharas that you are leaving in these children will have devastating consequences. And so people need to do what they can to subsume their egos and keep families together. If it takes, the scare tactics of fundamentalism in Christianity or Islam or whatever, Abrahamic religion, Judaism, I guess that covers all of them, or ideally to get at the root of that egoism and to discover the truths of the Buddha, and through meditation be able to root them out, so that we can keep families together and stop hurting children. Okay, I guess that's it. Bye.